My name is Melk, and in this video I'm going to show you the best way you can learn German on your own. We are going to cover the main aspects of how you can learn German. We will cover the daily routine that touches all the main aspects of learning German, including vocabulary, grammar, speaking and pronunciations, plus reading and writing. We will get to know the best resources for building each of these different skills depending on your current level. Und dann zusammen werden wir einen Studienplan erstellen, der dir genau passt. By the way, I'm a medical doctor. I moved from Uganda and I currently live in Germany. Now, whether you are a total beginner or somebody who understands a little bit of German, probably from trying out apps like Duolingo or LINGUA or whichever apps you've been using, or maybe you've learned a little bit of this German from your class, at this point it's actually important that you establish which current level you are at in Germany. And to do that, I recommend that you take this free Goethe Institute Proficiency German test. Links to everything in the description below. Now, before you dive into apps and movies and all the other things that you might be able to learn German with, it's important that you actually get to understand how the German language really works. The conjugation of verbs, the construction of sentences, and also the construction of questions. And to do that, you can check out these free courses. They are available and free on YouTube. Even if there are quite many accents, you don't have to worry about this because the German which is taught in school or the German that is used on official basis is called Hochdeutsch. Es klingt genau wie ich gerade spreche. Yeah, it sounds exactly like this, and you don't have to worry about different accents here and there. If you want to speak fluent German, it is very important that you build up vocabulary. And to do that, I recommend that you use flashcards. There are quite a number of methods out there which are quite helpful in making these flashcards. But the best of them is this app called Anki. Anki is a free app, free for both PC and Mac, and also free for Android users. Although for iPhone users, you might have to pay a small fee usually. I use a little bit of Anki for specific topics like anatomy and physiology while I was in medical school, so it's a very important app. So what is Anki specifically? I know there are quite a number of videos out there on YouTube which are discussing what Anki is, but Anki basically is a very wonderful software which is very helpful in learning. What it does, it uses a technique called active recall and spaced repetition, both of these which are very important in reinforcing memory, because we know that regular repetition of particular things at particular intervals is very helpful for one to be able to learn something totally off head. So I recommend this app. It is very wonderful, especially for learning things which are abstract and just need that you get them in your head. What you do is you simply just open up the app and start learning. So if you're in A1, I recommend that you use this deck. And if you're in A2, there is also this deck that I recommend that you use. If you're in B1 and B2, I recommend you use this deck. Now, the advantage with this particular deck is that it also has voice connotations of the words attached right to them. That means when you click on it, there is a voice behind showing you how you can be able to pronounce these words. Now, for C1 and C2, at this point, I don't recommend that you use already formed cards for you because at this level, the language is quite advanced. What I personally recommend is that you make your own cards at this level. That means depending on particular materials that you're consuming. For example, I have been currently reading this book. I think I've shared this book before, and I've been just making some cards from this book. So depending on different materials you're consuming on this level of C1 and C2, make your own cards depending on the new words that you come across. And sometimes these words can be gotten through podcasts or the TV shows you're watching. You just get the new words and then add them to the Anki. If you're someone who speaks English, the truth is you're going to find German quite weird at some point. This whole rule of always having the verb in the second position, and every time there is a comma in a sentence, the verb comes in the first position, and there are these weird instances where the verbs basically just pile at the end of the sentence, like they just wait, and they just pile. Boop, boop, boop. So for beginners, I basically recommend these two courses that I've already talked about before. They're both available on Spotify and on YouTube. And for intermediate learners, I recommend this particular source. Actually, it's a YouTube channel that is from the same lady. She does a very excellent way at explaining these grammatical rules. She's a very wonderful teacher, and I highly recommend her. And if you're an intermediate learner at this level, I also recommend this channel from a gentleman called Benjamin. Benjamin is a wonderful teacher. He does quite a very good job at explaining different grammatical rules, and I highly recommend this source. Now, if you are an advanced learner at this point in understanding the grammar, you have a lot of options available. What I basically did is I kind of went on bare knuckle. I like using this statement particularly. I recommend that you just get lots of material around. There's so many materials lying around that you can be able to get on the internet. You can be able to dissect and decipher some of the grammatical rules quite in there. But for further understanding, and if you want particular explanations which are very specific, there is still this wonderful channel of this particular gentleman called Benjamin. But the only caveat caveat or the only disadvantage to this is that it charges for C1 and C2. In other words, for you to be able to have access to some of these videos in C1 and C2, you have to pay a particular fee, I think. But I think it's worth it. Now, listening or hearing is the main input of a particular language, and it's the only way one can understand the technical know-how of how to use the language. If you can understand spoken German, it's very much easy that you're actually going to be able to read it and also to be able to write in this particular language. For this particular skill, I recommend different podcasts. Now, if you're in A1 and A2, I recommend both this podcast and this podcast. Now, this particular one is actually also available on YouTube that you can check out. The discussants here do a very wonderful job of simply discussing German in slow and an understandable way. Now, if you're in B1 and B2, I recommend this particular one, but also it is very important that you check out this one here. I think you can use them in conjunction with the other. This particular one is called Easy German. It's a very wonderful podcast which is available on Spotify. The founder of the channel, I think she's called Kari and Janos, plus another gentleman. They do a very wonderful job at discussing. They speak in very wonderful German, which is quite perfect for intermediate German learners. Now, I don't recommend this channel for specifically people who are total beginners, but if you are an intermediate learner, please check out that channel. It's available, like I said, on Spotify. They also have a YouTube channel, Easy German, and they are quite good with what they do. I recommend that channel. Now, with listening, if you're in C1 and C2, what I personally recommend here is that you kind of incline yourself towards podcasts which are more tailored in the direction of your particular work that you're planning to do. For example, personally, I have been listening to more of podcasts which are medically related because, yeah, like I said, at this level of the language, you're able to take in quite a lot. You're able to understand discussions on quite many topics. So I recommend that you incline your consumption towards the direction of the particular work that you're going to do. Now, personally, I've been listening to this particular podcast called Practice Now by Dr. Stierkat. There are thousands and thousands of podcasts which are available on Spotify. You can just plug in whatever topic that you want. And as you take in the language, there is a way the brain just learns how to listen to the language. And of course, most of these podcasts are done by people we call Muttersprachler or the native speakers. So I recommend that. I just recommend that you actually just use the podcasts well. And that means that at every level that you are, as you listen to the language, just pick the few words that you pick, punch them into the Anki card or the Anki app, and just keep on backing up your vocabulary. And in so doing, you'll be able to learn the language. Now, the most effective way of learning how to speak a language is, yes, you got it, practice. Unfortunately, there is no other way, there is no shortcut about this. Leider gibt es kein anderer Wahl. And so with speaking, I basically recommend 4 things. The very first thing that I highly recommend is called self-talk. So what is self-talk? Self-talk is basically kind of teaching yourself how to speak and think in German. Like you make that conscious decision to just keep practicing the German language at every point in time. For example, simple things like Ich trinke ein Tee. Or in case you're going to write, you just be like Ich schreibe. Ich lese ein Buch. Basically, kind of identifying those particular day-to-day activities that you do, and then you kind of just speak to yourself as you do them. Ich sitze mich hin. Like, you know, that means I'm sitting myself down. It's like an unconscious way, or rather a conscious way of training your brain to start thinking in German. Number 2 is ChatGPT. Now, in this era and age, there is no excuse of not learning the language should you actually be very serious at learning the language. Because right now, it's actually very available and very possible that you can have an audio conversation with ChatGPT. So what you do is basically you just tap in, or rather type in whatever you want to have the conversation about ChatGPT, and then the software will be very available for you to have the conversation with it. You can ask the software either to correct you when you make a mistake in your audio conversations, or you can just have a normal continued conversation, and that will be very helpful. Now, talking of online, there are of course very many apps that I would recommend. ByTalki, Tandem, and HelloTalki. They are quite very helpful with finding partners that you can practice a language with. And so you might want to check out these apps. The last and the most important technique of you learning how to speak is called immersion. I think this is very important. I don't even know how I can emphasize this, but every time you have an advantage of landing onto someone who is able to speak the language with you, kindly just take it up, because it works the magic, especially if you are speaking with somebody and you're free to being corrected. It is very important. I think you shouldn't wait for the perfect moment for you to be able to speak the language. That day might never come. So what you have to do is basically just embrace the discomfort and go for it. Learning to read in German is a very, very important skill if you're planning to study and work in German. In my case, of course, I was going to work as a medical doctor, and so that meant I was going to work with a lot of materials in German, of course patient files, the computer softwares, the general language used on words here is German, so that meant I had to learn German, and it's an important skill. For beginners and intermediate learners, luckily there are very many wonderful materials on this particular website that you can just go and check on. It is called LINGUA.com. On that page you can find quite a number of material that will be very helpful for you. Now for advanced learners at this level, I mean if you're in C1 and C2, what I basically do is I recommend that you pick up any materials that are available for you to read and basically just go in and start reading. And currently, like I said in the past video, I have been reading this wonderful book from this gentleman called Trevor Noah. It's called Born a Crime, and I've been reading the German version of this book. I'm almost finishing it. It's a wonderful book. So some of these things are very helpful in building up not only the vocabulary but in understanding how the German language works. The other thing is, personally, I read the Bible. My favorite translation of the German Bible is called Schlachter 2000. It's a very wonderful way of learning German if you want to. Now for writing, of course, writing is an important skill, especially like I said, if you're going to study or work in German, it's also an equally important skill. And what you can do in this particular place is, I think you can also evoke ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a wonderful tool. What you do is you can just have conversations with ChatGPT in German, and you can also set ChatGPT that ChatGPT will correct everything that you want it to correct in case you type wrong, or you can just have a normal conversation and learn how the conversations flow in written German. You can also use this wonderful software called DeepL. DeepL is a very wonderful Übersetzer or translator, so you can type whatever you want to type in, but in case it's not perfect, you use this particular thing called perfect writing, and when you do that, it kind of puts for you the text that you've typed in the way it should be in grammatically correct German. Now let's talk about the daily routine that you can be able to apply for you to be able to learn all these skills very effectively. Now unfortunately, there is also no shortcut here. You have to find time every day of at least 1 hour or at least 2 hours of sitting down every day. If you're in A1 or rather you are a total beginner of the language, I recommend working with the materials above. Listen to the videos and then just keep pausing and pausing. You pause and take notes, pause and take notes, and then you keep collecting your vocabulary. Meanwhile, you also be working with Anki, but at least 2 hours of work every day. Once you reach on A2, I recommend that you challenge yourself to a movie. There is this wonderful movie from Deutsch called Nikoswege. You can check it out. It's a wonderful movie. Actually, it goes from A1 to B1. For intermediate and advanced learners, your learning can actually be tailored to whatever particular needs that you have. Yeah, if you're in the direction of medicine, yes, that means the books that you're going to use are going to be more inclined into that direction. If you're going to be a general student, that means you're going to, of course, also work with general materials. You simply have to find 2 hours every day in your time and just sit down and listen, read and take the notes. But also in your free time as you're moving, you are plugging in the earphones and listening to the podcasts as much as possible. Plus, of course, don't forget to speak the language at every opportunity that presents itself. Now, ultimately, the most important thing is that you keep learning. Das Wichtige ist, dass du weiter lernst. Now, I hope I provided some value for you in this video. In case I did, please check out this other wonderful video where I go into detail of how I was able to do the learning. I go into much detail in that particular video. And of course, it would be wonderful if you give me a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you've not yet. And until the next one, bye and peace.